Welcome to the Community Renewal Society's 2022 Martin Luther King Jr. Faith in Action event. That angelic voice you heard was a member of St. Sabina Church Youth Choir. May her voice inspire us to lift our collective voices. Speaking of collective voices, at CRS, we like to use this very special day, to motivate our members to take collective action for social change rooted in love. If you love someone, set them free. Liberating love helps release oppressed people from the bondage of unjust laws and policies. Showing liberating love to marginalized communities is what's driving our work this year and every year. And what does liberating love have to do with reparations and economic justice? Well, in the words of Martin Luther King Jr., power without love is reckless and abusive. And love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice. And justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. Thank you so much for gathering with us today to express liberating love for the oppressed by taking collective action against injustice. Thank you so much.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. We welcome you to the 2022 annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Faith in Action Assembly. Our theme for this year is Liberating Love, and it is in love that we are delighted that you made the choice to be with us this year. My name is Natasha Robinson. I am a board member of Community Renewal Society. And on behalf of our visionary executive director, Reverend Dr. Waltrina Middleton, our beloved staff, and our dedicated board of directors, we welcome you into this digital space. This is our second year being on this side of the internet together, and we don't take your presence lightly or for granted. Our meeting in this way is our way of holding space for both love and accountability, making sure that we engage in the utmost caution of being together. While our hope is to be face-to-face next year, our faith lets us know that we will always be in community together. The mode of doing that has changed, but our mission and the meaning in our meetings will remain and be sustained. 2021, my goodness, what a year it has been for CRS. Our platform for renewal was and continues to be the method by which we seek to address and eradicate both racism and poverty. Together, you and I created racial healing circles, helped to pass impactful legislation such as the Empowering Communities for Public Safety Ordinance, the HIV Decriminalization Bill, and HB 3653, and put feet to our faiths by, as the late Dr. Katie Genevan Cannon would say, doing the work our soul would have in meeting needs of our communities, including our current platform of establishing opportunities for reparations, and most recently, providing clean water to our family housed in Stateville Prison. In short, we continue to make sure that what we say we believe aligns with both who we are and what we do, all of which you can learn about more on our website at www.communityrenewalsociety.org. Now I ask that you and I would center ourselves as we engage in the life-giving practice of prayer. Some call you God, some call you Olodumare, some call you Jehovah, some call you Allah. Some cannot even say your name because your name is so holy and sacred. But we acknowledge you and we thank you for who you are and who you have been in our lives. We give thanks and praise for this moment and this movement. We appreciate being joined together to do justice in the different ways we are called to do. We thank you for empowering us to be faith, to be liberating hope, to be liberating love in a world that does not consistently acknowledge the divinity in all of us. Allow us to feel the presence and power of our ancestors as we build upon what has been entrusted to us. Help us to create better futures, and relying on you, the ever-present God, help us to build better presence for those who feel discriminated against and marginalized. Bring us all back to the center where love through justice coexists. We seal our prayer with great expectation and gratitude. We thank you. Amen and Ashe.
It doesn't start with 40 acres and a mule, but that is included. An apology would be ideal that contains all of my ancestors' bones written in each line. I want to know that America knows what it has done to Black people. That racism is not over, it's just now disguised. That slavery is not over, it is just revised. I want my lift every voice and sing sung at every game. I want Juneteenth off from my classes and jobs. I want Black monuments of Marsha, Breonna, Fannie, and bell hooks too. I want all of our culture and food to be accessible but not appropriated. I want all of the seasonings of all of our correctly pronounced names gladly enunciated. I want the White House painted Black. I want the president Black. I want every street to be named after a Black person because all of them were built off of a Black person. I want every Black college and university funded. And I want every Black student given free tuition. I want every Black entrepreneur's dreams birthed. And I want every Black baby birthed and mama to be lived. I want all Black doctors, teachers, actors, artists, astronauts, fashion designers, chefs, hairstylists. When I say all Black everything, I mean every corner of this earth that my ancestors' blood landed upon to now be bloomed in flowers. I want everyone to know that tears can sow greatness that look like me. I want everyone to remember me and those who came before me, those who were lynched, those who were raped, those who were beaten a blue black or even a red black, those who picked cotton or sugar, those who weren't allowed to read, those who weren't allowed to sing, those who weren't allowed to be Black. My reparations gonna be as massive and structural and intentional as the abuse of slavery was to us. Because that is simply what we are owed. And when I say reparations now, I mean abolition of all things slavery. That means prison. Federal advancements on laws that give us what we need to thrive, and of course, ensuring to keep our ancestors' names alive. I demand reparations now because Black lives matter, because Black blood should no longer be spilled, because Black lives should no longer be shipped or enslaved or in chains, because Black lives are beautiful and deserve freedom. We deserve freedom. It doesn't start with 40 acres and a mule, but with an apology, an honest apology. That still means something too.
Hey, community comrades and friends. I'm Lucretia Burtz. I'm the Organizing Policy Associate at Community Renewal Society. And today I'm joined by my guest, Marvin Slaughter, who's also my friend. And he's the Interim Director of the African American Leadership Policy Institute. And he's also a member of our Economic Justice Issue Team. Thank you for joining me today, Marvin. Yeah, and so today we will be addressing reparations, and Marvin's here to help us break it down. So Marvin, let's get to the root of it. Why reparations? Why now?
It's a vital policy for the African American community. To be specific, the Black American community. Reparations, it all starts with the racial wealth gap, which has its start with slavery. African Americans contributed between $1 and $5 trillion to the white economy before 1860, we never got paid for any of that labor. We were basically the startup capital for these United States of America. We were the collateral for the stock market. We built so much of the infrastructure of this country and never actually got an opportunity to partake in the wealth that we created. If you look at, many different policy things like black codes, vagrancy laws, redlining, these are things post-slavery that have all contributed to the immense wealth gap that we're experiencing today. I mean, and even if you want to look at the over 100 different recorded instances of genocide and displacement experienced by Black Americans, and there are a few examples that come to mind most readily. Ocoee, Florida, where African American July Perry attempted to vote, and it caused mass hysteria, and white people from the surrounding counties decided that they wanted to come into Ocoee and basically frighten all the Black people and say that, hey, you guys cannot exercise your right to vote. And also, we've seen through the census data that after the terror that was the Ocoee, Florida massacre, there was a large amount of displacement of African Americans from Ocoee to surrounding areas. And they also sold their properties for, pennies on the dollar. It was a pittance. And when you start adding up all of these separate events, you get to the vast wealth gap that we see today, which, economists like Dr. William Darity say to ameliorate the median wealth gap is going to be at a minimum 2.7 trillion. And to ameliorate the mean is going to be at least 14.7 trillion, so about $15 trillion.
Okay, but Marvin, why reparations?
Oh, because without reparations, Black Americans will never actually have the opportunity to have power here in this country. Wealth, money is power here. We can't afford to run our own candidates. We can't afford the upkeep of our own, communities. Unfortunately, without that wealth, without that undergirding, we don't have the ability to be self-deterministic.
But why not, free education or some other universal policies maybe? Why not that?
Yeah, the typical rising tide lifts all boats theory. And it's proven to be wrong. Even if you look at things like free college for all, for instance, or forgiving all student loan debt. African Americans only make up about 20% of all student loans. White borrowers borrow about 55% of all student loans. If you were to forgive student loan debt, it actually might increase the racial wealth gap due to the fact that these white people who are graduating from these colleges and universities already have an economic undergirding. They already have wealth. If you forgive their student loan debt, they're just gonna go and buy houses. Whereas if you forgive Black American student loan debt, now we have medical debt to deal with. Now we have to worry about Big Mama's house. We have to worry about helping our brothers and sisters get through, and ultimately it's just gonna free us up to pay more bills.
My final question, why now? Why reparations right now?
Yeah, a report came out 2-3 years ago, I think a year before the pandemic, that said that Black America was approaching zero net wealth by the year 2050. Many speculate that the coronavirus and the pandemic have kind of accelerated that timeline. And like I said, a wealthless people are a powerless people. This is America's original debt. And I mean, even if you wanted to talk about the biblical origins of reparations, and you look in Exodus when God told the Israelites to go to the Egyptians and ask for silver and gold before they left Egypt, they went and did that. So, there is biblical principle behind the idea and the advocacy for reparatory policies for Black Americans.
There's been a growing movement across this country for reparations. I believe we're at the precipice of making reparations real. And that's why, in honor of Martin Luther King Jr. and all of our great freedom fighters who sacrificed their lives for racial and social justice, we're asking you to sign our 2022 reparations pledge. And you can do that by going to the website across the screen.
We would not be here today if it wasn't for the dreamers, the believers, the changers, People who are called crazy because they had a dream that black and white students could learn, that civil rights would be given, not earned, that the cross isn't a place for black people to burn, that anyone can marry anyone, that women have the right not to carry, but in this day of pandemics, it is hard to sleep, let alone dream. Why would anyone dream right now? When life seems to have everyone with their head down, bowing to negativity, it's easier to give up on each other than to give in to our Heavenly Father. You remember, the one, the Almighty, the dreamer, doer, and deliverer, and creator of all of this melanin magnificence. If you are looking down, notice your ancestors' shoulders you are standing on. Fix your crown, queen and king. Let your soul glow and radiate. You can be whoever you want to be in this world, no matter who sits in the White House, because my Father's house is the only one that matters. There are no walls, barriers, or required application. All that he asks is that you display proper demonstration of love and acceptance. In this time, I know it is easier said than done, but what if dreaming that you could be anything you want to be is more powerful than any gun and hate, and trusting in God and his fate for you is simply pouring honey on this wound from oppression and systemic depression. So how do you dream when for decades you have been deferred? Read his word. Start with Genesis. Make sure to read Psalms and Corinthians. Philippians 4:13 tells you exactly what you can do. Accept your ancestry, develop your destiny, remember your worth, because you are the earth and moon, and the sun will never stop shining on you. Every new day that you wake up is God just saying, do not give up. Dare to reach your established destiny and manifest in your purpose. Dream. Defer any resistance that emulates anything malignant. Dream. Do. Recreate every and any moment that God has predicted. Dream. I have a dream that one day all people can be people together, no matter the color of their skin or heart, and today is the day we should start.
Now it is my privilege to introduce our keynote speaker for our assembly, the Reverend Dr. Otis Moss III, Senior Pastor of Trinity United Church of Christ here in Chicago. I believe some of the words to describe our speaker are embodied in the words scholarship, service, and sounds. Dr. Moss is an alumnus of Morehouse College, Yale University, and the University of Denver School of Theology, having earned degrees focusing on religion and theology, philosophy, ethics, and social reform. He is my Divine Nine brother, as he is a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, the first, the oldest, and the coldest, inside joke, African American fraternity in the country. He is a preacher, poet, activist, author, and filmmaker with an eye towards justice and equality, as evidenced through the gospel of Jesus Christ. He founded the Unashamed Media Group, a justice-centered, faith-based agency committed to producing and curating stories to inspire the heart and challenge the mind. The Unashamed Media Group has produced 5 short films and sermons using cinematic liturgy in 2020. In October 2020, Dr. Moss created Otis's Dream, the award-winning short film about his grandfather's unsuccessful attempt to vote in 1946. Dr. Moss is ordained in the Progressive National Baptist Convention and the United Church of Christ. He is loyal to and an active supporter of Community Renewal Society. He is married to Monica Brown Moss, and they are the grateful parents of the amazing team of MK and Eli. Now, here are some things you may not know about Dr. Moss. His entire theology, as he frames it, consists of, and listen to this list, Rakim, Nas, Kendrick Lamar, MF Doom, Common, Black Thought, Andre 3000, Jay-Z, along with John Coltrane, Miles Davis, Louis Armstrong, Mahalia Jackson, Stevie Wonder, Prince, Aretha, and Rosette, plus Langston Hughes, Toni Morrison, James Baldwin, Zora Neale Hurston, August Wilson, Sonika Rahim, with Howard Thurman, Dr. James Cone, Ida B. Wells, Harriet Tubman, Fannie Lou Hamer, Frederick Douglass, Robert Smalls, Benjamin Mays, Malcolm X, and Martin Luther King Jr., setting the table for the entire crew. These are the sounds of influence and inspiration that comprise Dr. Moss's witness and work. As he speaks to us, open your ears and your hearts to receive his message and trust that the melodies and harmonies he brings will in fact be music to our ears. He is a living embodiment of scholarship, service, and sounds. I introduce to some and present to others my OM3, the husband to Monica, father of Michaela and Elijah. We know him as the Reverend Dr. Otis B. Moss III.
I want to say thank you to the Community Renewal Society and to our leader, our executive director, our poet and prophet, none other than Reverend Waltrina Middleton. We are so very proud of you and your witness, your work, and how you are leading the Community Renewal Society. I want to say thank you for this invitation, and to all of those who participated, all of our sister and brother institutions, and especially to our young people, our poets and our artists, thank you for allowing me to participate with you. You are so incredibly gifted, and you are such a blessing. In the words of Scripture, eyes have not seen, ears have not yet heard, what the glory of God will reveal in your life. Continue to use the spoken word to crack earth, break chains, and to communicate a level of consciousness we are afraid to witness in this world today. On behalf of Trinity United Church of Christ, I say this: we are delighted to be a part of Community Renewal Society, and we are delighted to be a part of this Martin Luther King Jr. celebration, where we are looking and examining the idea of reparations and the impact of collective trauma upon communities of faith and communities of color in this world today. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. If we could just bow our heads in a word of prayer very quickly, just want to offer this word of prayer. Search me, O God, and know my heart, and try me and see if there be any destructive way in me. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight. O Lord, you are my strength, and you are my Redeemer. Amen. He's one of the great prophets of music. One person that many of our younger people may not know about, you may never have heard of, but I would encourage you to talk to your parents and any person who is a scholar of hip-hop music will know that this person is the godfather of hip-hop by the name of Gil Scott Herron. If you have not heard, the revolution will not be televised. I invite you to make your way to iTunes or Tidal or YouTube. But there is one particular poem/song that I believe speaks to us at this moment. It was Gil Scott Herron, I believe it was in 1974, that he penned the lyrics to a song entitled, "Who Will Pay Reparations on My Soul?" And that is our subject for today. Who will pay reparations on my soul? But this is a Martin Luther King Jr. celebration. And for those who are not familiar with the philosophy, the theology, the teachings of Dr. King, they have disconnected the idea of reparations from the amazing, radical, and powerful work of Dr. King. I'm reminded of Dr. Vincent Harding, who was a friend and also one of the editors of Dr. King's messages. That incredible message, "A Time to Break the Silence," that was preached in 1967 at Riverside Church, was actually edited by Dr. Vincent Harding, who was a historian specializing in Black freedom movements, but was also a practitioner of what we would call mystic Christianity. He believed in slowing down and being silent out of the tradition of Howard Thurman. And in his book, Martin Luther King Jr., The Inconvenient Hero, it is Dr. Harding who begins a particular essay from a poet by the name of Carl Wendell Himes Jr. And the poem goes this way and speaks so much to the way in which we envision Dr. King. Now that he is safely dead, let us praise him, build monuments to his glory, sing hosannas to his name. Dead men make such convenient heroes. They cannot rise to challenge the images we would fashion for their lives. It is easier to build a monument than make a better world. Dead men make such convenient heroes. And there is a challenge today, because there are many people who prefer the convenient or domesticated Dr. King that never lived to the radical prophetic King who challenged America. And it was J. Edgar Hoover who wrote down, "He is the most dangerous man in America." That we would rather have a king who covers our sins instead of a prophetic king who exposes the rot at the very core of our souls. The radical king I know, who demonstrates the power of prophetic witness, versus this domesticated king, where we love to quote, "I have a dream," but never deal with the true message or the first portion of that message, where he stated that people of African descent have brought a check to the U.S. government, and that check was placed before those who claimed to be in power, and it was marked insufficient funds. See, it was Dr. King who lived a life, fashioned a theology that forced America to face the painful truth of her history and reckon with the present decay caused by the destructive myths promoted by Confederate evangelists and worshipers of a now gone antebellum South. The philosophy and the theology of Dr. King was what one writer calls a black social gospel, an Ubuntu eschatology. The nation had a particular idea that it must not to reckon with the history that we were facing. And it was Dr. King that was forcing us to reckon with our history. You see, one must understand that Dr. King, as the writer Gary Dorn was stating, was attempting to break white supremacy and cast it forever within this purgatory of American mythos. But today, we want the domesticated. Today, we want the myth of Dr. King. Today, we want to be able to show up to programs with those who fight against voting rights and continue to also place funding to incarceration, want to show up at these programs all across the United States and quote simply, "I have a dream," but not deal with the radical king. I'm sorry. If in fact you are a studier, if you are a student, if you are a mentee of Dr. King, there are three things in which you must understand, three areas that he was forcing America to deal with. One was militarism. The other was poverty. And the final one was racism. He saw them as a trinity of destruction upon the American project and the human soul. Militarism. Before we talk about reparations, we must understand what militarism, especially within the American context, is. Militarism, state-sponsored suffering, where you have accumulated resources and placed those resources toward the military, but you are unconcerned about the day-to-day living of people in Greenwood, Mississippi, in Pembroke, Illinois, or even in East St. Louis. Wherever it may be, militarism, as Dr. King stated, that we will spend so much money, close to $35 million on one bomb to bomb a Viet Cong, but we will spend less than $1,500 to educate a child in Mississippi. Militarism. Where we end up having these strange phallic fantasies about large bombs that show our power instead of seeing that our real power comes in the ability to be able to raise a generation that is not yet born by providing them the necessary resources for a life where they will flourish and be able to thrive. Militarism. It is Dr. King who stated that I say to you today that if our nation can spend $35 billion a year to fight an unjust war in Vietnam and $20 billion to put a man on the moon, it can spend billions to put God's children on their own 2 feet. Militarism. The fact that we are sponsoring suffering outside of the United States or suffering inside through state-sponsored means where people feel as if they are in an occupied territory and not living in their own community. Militarism also connects with police brutality because militarism is the idea that there are particular institutions that promote and protect and serve the state, but not serving all of the people. Dr. King spoke about militarism, that America spends more money than any other nation on earth on our military. And are we safer for it? America has the largest per capita of spending on incarceration than any other industrialized nation. Are we safer for it? America spends more on state and local criminal justice, but are we better for it? Dr. King was raising the question of militarism, that a society is not judged by its army, but judged by how you treat your children. Militarism, this first idea. But yet in this country, Can you imagine that even in New York, that we will spend $127,000 to incarcerate one person, but only about $12,000 in order to educate one person? It would seem to me, if you were to flip those particular numbers, that literally you could put someone through 4 years of college, and in some places, depending upon the college that you are sending them to, you could send them to graduate school also. But we would rather invest in incarceration, rather invest in violence, instead of flourishing and thriving militarism. This is the one area that Dr. King dealt with. But the other area was also poverty. He stated in 1967 that he believed that every American should have a guaranteed income, that capitalism in its structure was a problem, unrestricted capitalism. He said it this way, I paraphrase. He says that communism does not understand that the individual has a life. And capitalism does not understand that individuals live in a collective consciousness with a social contract. That it's not one or the other, but one must understand that if we are to build a society, there must be a social contract, a moral social contract. And poverty becomes the way in which people are destroyed. And in other words, they are not able to fully flourish as human beings. Poverty. And when you mix poverty with gender and poverty with race, it becomes a destructive force that begins to decay the soul. Where a child, as Dr. King stated, living in Mississippi cannot see the sky of his dreams. He can only see what is right before him and will never be able to move out of the moments of debt and of thinking that he must always live in an impoverished world. Militarism, poverty, these two areas that politicians do not want to deal with, these two areas that many people do not want to engage with, were primary to Dr. King's message, his philosophy, and his theology. But then finally rounding that out was this idea of racism, of breaking white supremacy, as Gary Doran states. This idea that this social constructed idea of race, a complete, utter myth, something that has been made up. Now hear me, I did not say no ethnicity that is different than race. Ethnicity is where you have a history. Ethnicity connects with your country. Ethnicity speaks with language. Ethnicity speaks with culture. But the idea of race is socially constructed, where one is above and someone is below, and we have placed a particular value solely based on biological means that someone made up in 1619 when 20-odd Africans landed in Port Comfort, Virginia. That all of a sudden the idea of race entered into the American project's bloodstream, solely to ensure that a plantation class could have power. And the reason that there is even race in America today is because black enslaved Africans joined with European indentured servants, and they realized that the real issue was the person who owned the plantation. And after the Bacon's Rebellion in Virginia, there was an introduction of this idea that we've got to give those who are indentured servants and from Europe, they cannot connect with those who are African and enslaved. We will tell them that they are white and we'll give them a privilege, but we won't give them any more money so they can go through one door that the black person cannot. As long as they look down on someone else, then we know we are safe from a revolution. It was Dr. King who was saying that we must break this idea and allow people to be able to embrace the true sense of power. As he was speaking to the SCLC group at one of their particular gatherings, I believe it was their annual retreat, he said one of the things that we must do collectively as a community is, one, yes, we must break this idea of racism, but we also must claim black power. We must claim black power in this understanding what black power means. It means that in America, There are so many definitions connected to black that are negative. We must connect this idea that is something that is affirmative, that God has made us this way and God does not make any mistakes. This is radical to some who did not know this. That you have the person that we lift up and domesticate was also the one who is embracing black power and believe that within our community that we should be able to control and make sure those dollars continue to flow. They say he said it right at the retreat at SCLC and believe in 1966. Militarism, poverty, and racism. Removing these from the equation in America's project will allow for every child to thrive. But the question that we must raise, the question that we raise today, is who will pay reparations on my soul? Some are raising the questions, what reparations, what does this mean? What are you saying here, preacher, today? What is this idea of reparations? That reparations simply means repair. That I must repair because there has been a trauma that has taken place. And I must acknowledge that trauma. And the one thing that if there are to be reparations in this country, there must be an acknowledgement of collective trauma in this democratic project. Collective trauma, not just for one group, but collective trauma that infects everybody. And not everybody may be responsible, but everybody is accountable. How is this collective trauma doled out? What happened? I mentioned that in 1619, 20 or so odd Africans landed in what is known as Port Comfort, Virginia, introducing the idea of race in this country. But not only there in Point Comfort, Virginia, something happened in 1775, according to Nicole Hannah Jones, that in 1775, there was the governor of Virginia, the one who had been appointed by the British royal monarchy. And this person by the name of John Murray was the royal governor, the Earl of Dunmore. When he realized that some of the colonists were not getting in line, that there were some rumblings that were going on among the elite in Virginia and in other colonies in America, he did something that changed America forever. It was the mayor of Virginia, the Earl of Dunmore, John Murray, who made the statement that he will free all of the slaves that are under his jurisdiction in Virginia, and they can join the Ethiopian regiment and fight on behalf of the British to make sure that the colonists stay in their place. This statement angered someone by the name of George Washington and James Madison and Thomas Jefferson. John Murray, please understand, he was not an abolitionist. The only reason that he mentioned these words is because he was trying to create the kind of fear among the colonists, knowing that they would base their ideas on power, on how many slaves they had and the production they could create. And if he could put enough fear in them, he could put them in line. But it did not just anger the colonists, it moved them to action. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, they were so deeply moved and angered that they decided to become patriots. Not patriots for Great Britain, but patriots for an independent colony that would eventually call itself the United States of America. I don't think you heard what I just said. In other words, America's revolution wasn't just about the Boston Tea Party and taxation without representation. America's revolution, as a result of John Murray making this decree saying that he would free the slaves, it was George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and James Madison who said, we can't lose our money nor our property. We must rebel against Great Britain. That even the American Revolution is tainted by the idea of slavery. And it does not stop there. That in 1861, when the Confederate Southern states decided that they would be traitors to the Union, yes, traitors to the United States. They had a January 6th mentality that they would have an insurrection and move from the Union because they did not like some of the votes, because they were afraid that they would lose power. Not that they would lose their slaves, but they would lose power in the Senate. They would lose power in Congress. They decided that they would form their own union. And in forming their own union, that slavery would be the law of the land. The bloodiest war that America has experienced, where 20% of all white men in the South were wiped off the face of the earth, where 1.2 million people were injured and over 600,000 people died, solely so they could say, I'm going to keep my slaves and my plantation. But the story does not stop there. Because even after what is known as the Emancipation Proclamation, that when people of African descent were supposedly free and moving into the moment of Reconstruction, it was Southern states, because they had been pardoned by Andrew Johnson after the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. It was Andrew Johnson who then pardoned all of the traitors in the Union, in the Confederacy. And as a result of that pardoning, those people who led the insurrection, all of a sudden moved into Congress and Senate and in state houses, and they instituted a new form of slavery in America that we do not want to talk about. They instituted what were called the Black Codes that re-enslaved 500,000 black people in the South. How did it work? It worked simply like this. That if you lived in Mississippi, Alabama, or Georgia, or Tennessee, or South Carolina, you had to sign a contract every year with the person who owned land in the area. It was the law of the land. You had to sign this contract to say you will work next year as a sharecropper. If you did not have papers on you that you were working for a plantation. Remember, this is after slavery. Supposedly everyone has been freed. It was legal to arrest you under what was known as a vagrancy law. The vagrancy law placed you in jail and then sold you to a company to work off your debt for 8 to 9 or 10 years. From 1865 to 1972, 500,000 people were re-enslaved. And then a system was created around incarceration by seeing people of African descent, specifically in a criminal context, by weaponizing their skin as saying, if I see you, then I know that you are up to no good, because there is something nefarious about who you are, your very nature and character, your very spirit. And it was Nixon, according to Michelle Alexander, who then passed what we know as the War on Drugs, those particular bills that ended up incarcerating close to 2 million people whose labor was again then sold to private companies. From 1865, the system put in place in order specifically to re-enslave an entire community. Who will pay reparations on my soul? And some are saying, well, what do you mean, these reparations? That was in the past, that is not now. No, that past still informs our present and our future. Because immediately after the Civil War, there was something known as the Special Orders 15, where African Americans were to be given 40 acres and a mule, where Georgia and South Carolina, the coastal region, was going to be the farming region of people of African descent, where people who specialized already knew how to grow those things in that area. From not only the cotton, but the greens, to make sure that you had the black-eyed peas, the tomatoes, and the yams, all of those things. That we already knew how to develop those things. Those special orders were rescinded, and the 40 acres was never given. But the 40 acres was never given, but the Homestead Act was passed. The Homestead Act gave 160 acres to many of those poor whites, many of them who came from the South, who fled the South, to give them 160 acres if they moved out west. So one group got reparations. Another group got a promise that was never kept. Who will pay reparations for my soul? Now, there are some saying that I was not present, I was not there, I don't have anything to do with this. No, this is the collective idea of our democracy, that literally, in order for us to become a world power, America needed the labor of people of African descent. That if we were to count up the literal cost of slavery, today we are talking about close to several $1 trillion. That 80% of America's income in the late 1800s came from slave labor. That, in other words, America became a world power because it had free labor. For 247 years, the people of African descent were enslaved longer than they were free in this country. That not until 1965 were we considered to be full citizens, to even have the full right to vote. Though we had it on paper, we still had to give redress because of something known as states' rights. And states' rights keeps rearing its ugly head every time people want to be able to vote in this nation, even today. Where, when Stacey Abrams ran for governor, almost 200,000 people were taken off the voting rolls, the largest voter purge in history, because they claimed they had the wrong address, or they might have been formerly incarcerated, or they didn't vote in the last 2 elections. They removed them from the polls, and now we have a system in place, just in Georgia, where there's not enough polling places, and it's illegal to give someone a glass of water if they're waiting for 6 or 7 hours to vote. Who will pay reparations for my soul? If America is to be America, if America is to become the nation that it claims to be, then America must first face its painful past. Not so people can hang their heads, but to say that there is some good, there is some bad, and there is some serious ugly within our history. And if we are willing to face that history, we can fix our future, because nothing can be fixed if it's not faced. Who will pay reparations on my soul? And we are at a point in America where we must acknowledge the pain of the past. We are at a point in America where we must also count up the cost and raise the question, what must we do? I can't give you a number. I will not give you a number, but I can say that there is a moral duty, if we are to move forward as a country, to be willing to face our past. And we are in the midst of a second Reconstruction backlash. That is what critical race theory and the backlash that you hear all across the nation, it has nothing to do with Derek Bell and Kimberly Crenshaw, because the people who are talking know nothing about critical race theory that is taught in law schools. No. The question that they are raising is that we do not want to face our past. That in Virginia, yes, in Virginia again, they outlawed Toni Morrison's Beloved. Across Texas, they are outlawing the idea that you have to say slavery was bad, to actually put in the textbooks to say that the slaves were happy. We're dealing with a backlash where people do not want to face the past, but the only way that we can become an America that we want to be is we have to face what happened in our yesterday in order to fix what will happen in our tomorrow. Acknowledge our past in order to face this moral injury that has happened, that who will pay reparations upon our soul? And the only way that reparations work is that you have to acknowledge that pain. You have to raise the question that there has been an injury, there has been a trauma, that there must be something in order to reckon with this moment, but it should be a reckoning that should bless everyone. Hold on, wait a minute. You mean pass out checks, everyone? No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the idea that when our children's children understand our past, whether indigenous, enslaved, or immigrant, because we all fall into one of those three categories. If we have a clear view of our yesterday, and that there were moments when men of power ended up taking advantage of people, and that we create a system to reckon with that, then we can have reconciliation. But there is no reconciliation unless there is justice first. So don't talk reconcile if we're not talking justice. Justice and reconciliation go hand in hand, but justice has to walk through the door before reconciliation can come behind. So there must be reconciliation. And it's amazing to me that in all other institutions we understand this. I'm a sports fanatic. I love sports. I ran track in high school. And I remember a young person asking me about the 400 meters, about the track. A young person was saying it's not fair that there are people, when you start the race for the 400 meters, that some people get a head start. I had to say to the young person, no, that's called a staggered start. Because you see, the people in the lane 1 and lane 2, they're actually running a shorter distance. And so the judge, the refs, had to make sure that everybody's running the same distance. So some people had to be put out farther ahead so that all things will be equal, recognizing that not everybody is running the same distance. You're still missing what I'm saying. Well, I love basketball also. Love everything about basketball. I love college basketball. I love pro basketball. I love AAU. I love high school. I just love basketball. I love the WNBA. I love the NBA. I love everything about basketball. But there's something beautiful about basketball that is different from every other sport. I was watching the other day, and it dawned on me as I was praying and thinking about this message. I saw LeBron James going to the basket, but he got fouled. In other words, there was some trauma upon his body, and the referee blew the whistle. And they do something that's different in basketball that they do not do in all of the sports. They give the player a free shot. In other words, no one tries to block it. They say, because you were injured, because someone didn't play by the rules, we're going to put you on the line, and you'll have the opportunity for a free shot. People can make noise if they want to, but it still will not take away the fact that you get a free shot. People can shout and call you names, but they still will not take away from the fact that you've got a free shot. That you're placed on the foul line because they hold on to the fact that if you've been injured, if you've been hurt, if someone has broken the rules, then you have the opportunity for a free shot. I told you I'm a basketball nerd, so I did some research, and I found out that there is no team ever recorded in professional sports, in basketball, WNBA, that can't win or compete unless they get some free shots. You completely missed it. The only way you can compete on the court is there's got to be someone who says that you've been injured, there's been some trauma, and therefore you get a foul shot. And when you get those foul shots, you have an opportunity to compete at the level with everybody else. And I believe in America there needs to be some foul shots for the fouls that were caused in 1619, the fouls that were caused in the 1700s, the fouls that were caused in the post-Reconstruction era, the fouls that were caused as a result of the war on drugs. But just give us some foul shots so that we can compete at the same level. It's not to destroy anybody, it's not to harm anybody, but so that we can be at the same level, just like running track. So that it can be a staggered start, that some people are not running the same distance as others. So I must bid you good day. May the Lord bless you and keep you. But we must raise the question, who will pay reparations for our soul? We must acknowledge the injury. We must count the cost of the injury. And we must allow justice to walk through the door and reconciliation to come behind. So we can raise that question of who will pay reparations on my soul. God bless you.
Peace and liberating love. I'm Reverend Dr. Waltrina Middleton, Executive Director with Community Renewal Society. Thank you for joining us for our annual Martin Luther King Jr. Faith in Action Assembly and celebration. We are overjoyed and honored that you spent this important day of mission, reflection, and service with us. We hope you will join us in our work on the platform issue of reparations introduced today by our organizing and policy team. Thank you to our entire CRS staff, all of our participants, St. Sabina Selah Youth Choir, poet Kwyn Townsend Riley, reparations advocate Marvin Slaughter, CRS board member Natasha Robinson, and our 2022 MLK keynote, Reverend Dr. Otis Moss III, all of our partners and friends that made today possible. That includes you. As we close today's programming, please remember that another way you can support our work at CRS is to make a charitable donation or offering. Please consider making a donation in support of our work on reparations. You can use the QR code on your screen or visit our website to make a one-time or monthly recurring gift. Thank you so much for your support. Help me welcome back our poet in residence, Kwyn Townsend Riley, and the amazing St. Sabina Selah Youth Choir to close us out with a poem and musical benediction. May God's liberating love and peace abide and keep us until we meet again. Go in peace.
What happens to a dream when the dreamer is deceased? Destroyed at the hands of police, decreased from person to poster child of senseless violence. Do their parents continue the dream for them? How can one dream when reality keeps you up at night? Staying woke is the survival guide. Why would anyone dream? How am I supposed to look up when all my friends are buried below me? Chicago is becoming a burial site. Seeds are growing up to become tombstones. The moans of mothers and groans of fathers are the melody to the Greek tragedy that always ends the same way. Black kids are dying before black kids are trying to make it out. And I'm thinking, what happens to a dream when it's denied? As a woman, people never tell me to dream high, only to make sure that whatever dress I'm in, I'm covered from my neck to my thighs. My name wasn't called at any Black Lives Matter protest. It seems as if Chicago was able to rest just fine when we heard of Sandra Bland, Rekia Boyd, Natasha McKenna, Miriam Casey, Tanisha Anderson, Yvette Smith, Chantel Davis, Ayanna Jones. For decades, women's bones have only been used as fertilizer for black men to grow, so when we die, it seems more sacrifice than outrage. Still, everyone quotes King, but not Coretta. Love Tupac, but don't mention Asada. Movements will not be able to grow without the nourishment of mothers, Kathleen Cleaver, Ella Baker, Fannie Lou Hamer, Angela Davis. Christians play amnesia and forget they wouldn't have Jesus without a Mary. When trans women are murdered, no one seems to care. So what happens to a dream discarded? A dream discarded looks like two women not being allowed to be married. The closets are meant for clothes, not for people. Yet each year, more children, teens, and adults are dangling inside their bedroom closet doors next to winter coats and thrift store finds, hoping that their sexuality is something that they can return. The dreams that I have now are just of a world where we can all be free. And people are not only given what they need but deserve. An earth full of fertile possibilities, love and acceptance, rights that are not only written in law but practiced in community unity through grace and understanding. That's what MLK wanted, right? The man killed for doing nothing but fighting for the people. That's what Fred Hampton wanted, right? The man killed for doing nothing but fighting for the people, both assassinated, both annihilated, yet the revolution continues. The dreamers still dream. So what happens to a dream when the dreamer is deceased? The dream is passed on to the next dreamer until that dream is complete.
Show me your face, fill out this space. My world needs you right now. My world needs you right now. I can't escape being afraid. Fill me with you right now. My world needs you right now.
Show me your face, fill up the space. My world needs you right now. My world needs you right now. I can't escape being afraid. Fill me with you right now. My world needs you right now. Power fall down, bring with it a sound that points us to you right now. Erase substitutes right now. Fix what I see, and God, please fix me. My world needs you right now. Let us see you right now. Power fall down, bring with it a sound that points us to you. That points us to you right. Erase substitutes right. Fix what I see. And God, please fix me. And God, please fix me. My world needs you. My world needs you right. Lord, let us see you right now. Every heart in the world, God needs you to rescue. Storms have come and torn our hearts in two. We need you. Show me your face, fill up this space. The world needs. My world needs you right now. My world needs you right now. Jesus. 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 Nobody like you, Jesus. Power is in the name.
My world needs you right now. My world needs you right